Hello, everyone. My name's Alan Dick, and on behalf of my fellow co founders, Scott Silverman and Veronica Sonsev, as well as the rest of the Commerce Next team, I want to welcome you to today's webinar. Today is Wednesday, November 8th, 2023, and our topic this week is Revolutionizing Retail, Generative AI's Role in Improving the Customer Experience. Before we go any further, I'd like to welcome and thank today's speakers. We have Amy Salino. She's the Director of Digital and E-commerce at Cerberus Capital Management. Bill Bass, the CMO of Full Beauty Brands. Annie Butler, the CIO CTO of Adorama. And Mark Stracuza, the Director of Portfolio Strategy at Commerce Tools. Speaking of Commerce Tools, I want to thank them for sponsoring today's webinar. We could not bring these webinars to you without the support of our sponsor partners. It's been a real pleasure working with Mark, as well as with Shannon Kelly and Stevie Hutchinson over at Commerce Tools. Thanks so much for helping us put this all together. Next, I also want to thank the Commerce Next staff. That's Veronica, Scott, Jill, Maeve, and Robert, who are all off screen helping this webinar become a success. And thanks to all of you, the audience, for taking the time to be with us today. I want to take a moment to note that our final webinar of the year takes place on Wednesday, December 6th. The topic is Cyber Week Recap, Lessons Learned and Advice for 2024, and it features Jason Goldberg. Now, he is one half of the very successful Jason and Scott Retail podcast, as well as the Chief Commerce Strategy Officer at Publicis Group. Now, after Jason gives his recap, we'll have executives from Marine Layer, 511 Tactical, and Synchrony join him to discuss his findings and offer advice for a successful 2024. Our very own Scott Silverman will be at the helm to guide the discussion and take questions from the audience. Our end of the year webinar is always one of the highest rated and best attended, so please register now using the link in the chat. Speaking of popular and fun things, Commerce Next is hosting our annual holiday charity parties in both New York and Los Angeles next month. Our New York party is on Tuesday, December 5th, and the LA reception is on Thursday, December 7th. It's a great way to network with your peers, get their take on how Q4 is going, win a bunch of great prizes, and perhaps most importantly, help us support St. Jude's Children's Research Hospital in their fight against childhood disease. Now, Maeve is going to place the registration links to both of those parties in our chat. If you're interested in sponsoring the parties, email our CRO, Emily Wander, at emily@commercenext.com. That's EMILY at commercenext.com. Now, before we review today's agenda, just want to remind you that our YouTube channel is chock full of videos. We have over 330 of them sitting over there, covering topics including acquisition, retention, leadership, retail technology, and so much more. Maeve's going to toss another link in the chat so you can go visit our YouTube channel to see the full lineup. All righty, here we go. Here's the agenda for today. We're going to start off with Mark Stracuza discussing how AI can transform your customer experience. After that, we're going to get your take on using generative AI with 2 poll questions, kind of to get your temperature on that. And finally, we'll have our expert panel discussion, where we'll all dive into more strategies and tactics you can use to improve your customer's experience, and of course, take your questions. All right, before we bring Mark up, just want to note that we're recording today's webinar. We'll make it available by tomorrow. And also, for those of you new to our webinar series, let's take a quick moment to review the functionality tabs at the top right of the screen. There are 4 tabs: Chat, Q&A, Polls, and Handouts. Please use the Chat tab when you want to communicate with other attendees. Use the Q&A tab when you want to ask the speakers a question. And the Polls tab is where you can participate in the polls and review the results. And finally, the Handouts tab is where you have today's presentation and other materials available for you to download. One important thing to remember, you can show your interest in a specific audience question by upvoting it. This really helps me prioritize which questions to present to the panel. Lastly, if you're watching this on the replay, well, thanks for joining us. And please know that the handouts are available by clicking on the highlighted document icon in the video player. And now let's welcome Mark Stracuza to our virtual stage. Mark, come on up.
Hey, how's everybody doing? Well, hello,
good, man.
And thanks for the intro there, Alan.
Absolutely.
I am Mark Stracuza, Director of Portfolio Strategy here at Commerce Tools, and I'm going to talk with you today about generative AI's role in improving customer experience. Of course, generative AI is at the center of every conversation lately, and most major conferences just can't say enough about it. So how can it help you and your business improve customer experience? All right, let's start by level setting the 2 major areas of AI, predictive and generative. And predictive AI uses machine learning and statistical algorithms to analyze data and predict future occurrences. finding patterns and anomalies in your data. And some examples are like fraud detection or payment routing in your PSP, order routing in your OMS. Vector search leverages this. Generative AI creates new content with characteristics related to the training data it initially provided, using advanced algorithms and deep learning methods. And the key point here is creating new. If you're building something from nothing, you're most likely using generative AI. And some e-commerce examples here are creating product data within your PIM, adding new content to your CMS, generating images for your DAM, or marketing emails for your CRM. And today, of course, we're going to focus on generative AI. And here's a quick overview of how generative AI works. So data, text or otherwise, is consumed and then divided into tokens. Each token is a consumable piece of the source material, and it helps to think in terms of maybe a word segment or a small pixel grouping. These tokens are learned and trained, and from the training, patterns emerge. These patterns are then learned and are used to create foundational models, and then the foundational models are used as the basis for various response-based interactions. Okay, when interacting with a foundational model, there are different ways to influence the successfulness of the responses. And I apologize in advance, this is a term slide, but it's super important. So let's dive in. Context is how you tell the AI what persona it should respond with. You provide a description and it influences the response. So for instance, you might want to tell your AI that it's an expert in fashion and has an extensive knowledge of a specific brand. Or maybe that your AI can only respond in the form of a limerick. Context sets the stage for your responses. And be careful though, because if the persona it's being told isn't achievable, it's just going to make stuff up. And okay, I couldn't help myself. So for fun, I set my context to say the AI could only respond in the form of a limerick. And then I asked it to tell me about composable commerce. And so the results were, in a world where commerce does glide, composables the trends worldwide. With pieces you pick and modules that click, for tailored solutions, it's tried. All right, okay, having a little fun, moving on. Prompt engineering is how you format the questions you ask of the AI. The better the prompt, the better the response. And this is the fundamental basis of most generative AI interactions. Everything is a prompt and response pairing, and it can be harder than you might think. It's a skill, and it requires time to improve. Training is when you provide information to your LLM for it to use. This might mean you give it documents or websites or whatever data might be useful. Giving your model access to large amounts of high-quality data is vital to successful training. Fine-tuning is when you provide examples of high-quality question and answer pairs, usually a lot of them, to your AI. It can then learn to improve its responses. This process typically means you're prompting your AI, getting a response, then indicating if this response is good or bad and why. The AI can then learn from this interaction and use it for the next iteration. This will most likely take many iterations before you're going to see the impact. Guardrails are when you parse the request prompt prior to sending it to the AI. You might want to either add additional prompt context or maybe prevent certain questions from being asked. All of these help your generative AI model respond more accurately and more appropriately to the questions it's asked. But there are additional factors that also impact the behavior of your generative AI responses. The temperature setting controls how much creativity your responses will have. Low temperature will give more accurate but less creative responses. High temperature is going to do the opposite. The token count used by your LLM will indicate how much information you can pass and get back in a single request. It also impacts how much parallelization the LLM does when comparing tokens for the response data. So in general, higher token counts are better, but also more expensive. And hallucinations are when AI just makes stuff up. And this happens when the LLM doesn't have the data to give an accurate answer, or maybe your temperature is too high, or maybe it just did it anyway. Generative AI is a very convincing liar, and if you don't know, it's very hard to tell when hallucinations are occurring. Okay, we got through the terms. We did it. All right, cool. So now we're level set on some Gen AI basics. How can we leverage this new technology to help commerce experiences? What we know is that Gen AI is very good at patterning and mimicking the way humans interact with each other. But the current state-of-the-art commerce experiences are, for the most part, predefined interactions. The brand's going to create content. The user will consume content. Each of these are separate processes. And while the content can be tailored to individual users, the content is mostly static. Like a product page is going to list static information. It may be localized, it may be translated, but it's not going to be dynamic. A customer searches through content sources by static facets and words. And ads might vary based on user behavior, but the ads themselves are going to be mostly static. AI can be trained to interact with people in their own language and way of speaking, converting data and words to expand search criteria for better results. answer natural language requests instead of having people try and figure out how to find what they're looking for, and then dynamically create content in all areas of the user experience. So the first set of commerce use cases that started leveraging Gen AI was a generation of product descriptions. And Gen AI is very good at creating and modifying text based on a given set of inputs. So you can ask your AI to take a few product facets and generate descriptions in a specific tone of voice or for a specific customer type. With new updates in image recognition, you can also just give AI a picture of a product and ask it to write a set of facets in a description. If it isn't right the first time, you can ask it to update its output based on the changes you'd like it to make. Of course, image recognition could just as easily be image generation. If you provide a set of facets in a description, Gen AI can create imagery to portray that visually. So let's talk a moment about how this can be accomplished. For new content generation, it's really just as easy as prompting an AI on what information you'd like it to output. If you're working within brand guidelines, you can set up your context to be your brand persona. This will enable the AI to know how it should format the output with regards to tone and style. At Commerce Tools, we did a proof of concept integration for product description generation, leveraging our APIs and ChatGPT-4. It took one of our customer success engineers a little over an hour to accomplish the full end-to-end proof of concept. And this included a merchant-centered integration. So this shows the power of both generative AI, but also having easily integratable APIs. And this might be a great way to introduce AI into your organization. But this is for the generation of new content. What do we do with existing content that might not be performing to the level we'd like? Let's say we get our predictive AI to tell us when product is underperforming compared to its peer products. We can have an AI parse that page and its content. We can also have it parse the peer pages that are more successful. Then we can get recommendations on how to improve the performance of the underperforming product. Again, this can be accomplished by leveraging mostly off-the-shelf generative AI. Simply provided a link to your website or the underlying backend data that surfaces to your website. You might need to set your token count a bit higher to ensure the multiple examples are correctly remembered. For either of these use cases, you can train your model for more aligned results. The more you train, the more your model will reflect the desired results and the less hallucinations you're going to have. To lower the variance in the output, you can set your Gen AI temperature to a low value. If you'd like more creativity and the accompanying less accuracy, go ahead and set that temperature just a little bit higher. Leveraging your user data, you can work with Gen AI to create hyper-personalized content. This can come in many forms, but the common thread is tailoring the content to the individual and not the user type. So it doesn't matter by whom or when the content was originally generated. Gen AI is a pathway into meeting people where they are right now. So let's start by talking about basic human consumption of information. There are over 7,000 languages spoken in the world today. Realistically, we cannot spend time localizing content to all of those. But AI can dynamically take a single source of information and translate it to the user's preferred language. But even within the confines of a single language, we all speak slightly different versions. We learn and understand information differently based on where and how we grew up and where our experiences have taken us. AI can generate content that matches the way we talk and the way we inherently listen. The beauty of this style of personation is that AIs can do it with a high level of confidence today. Most LLMs have been trained on massive amounts of publicly available content in all sorts of languages. That enables them to be very good at translating content and at imitating tone and modifying content towards that tone. And if you haven't already, I really encourage you to play around with a model and ask it to generate some text. And then ask it to take that generated text and write it in the style of Shakespeare. It's a fun way to see the power that exists in these LLMs. Another example might be a major brand signs a celebrity as a spokesperson. The customer-facing experiences can be dynamically updated to sound and read as if it were that celebrity talking. Your chatbot can become anyone. And all of this can be done without updating the source data set. The AI is taking the singular source of data and presenting it differently based on your needs. This would take training a model on the celebrity's voice. And just to be clear, by voice here, I mean both actual voice and written voice. This might be easier than you think. If the celebrity has already a lot of content on the internet in their voice, then the AIs might already be trained on them. Taking my Shakespeare exercise from before is one such example. But if that data doesn't exist, you can train an LLM on this new data set by just giving it access to a set of examples and then fine-tune that model to ensure the results are in line with your expectations. Sometimes this tuning can take time to get right, but the results can be astounding. All right, well, let's just look a little bit into the future. In the future, you might be able to dynamically create content as it's consumed on either base information templates or fully generated content. So imagine viewing a TV show and a character comes out holding a can of soda. Based on the user data, we know that I prefer Coke, whereas my kids prefer Sprite. So the same show, the same content, but the can of soda is dynamically generated to be one or the other based on who's watching. The same applies to images and ads. The content can be dynamically created based on the up-to-date customer profile. And as the user shops, that profile changes and the images can be dynamically updated as well. For all of this, you want to ensure a high level of accuracy in your responses. And this will take a significant amount of model training and tuning. And if you're going to open up to dynamic content, you have to be sure it won't do something to damage the brand. This is why hyper-personalization is likely a bit down the road as far as practical usage. It's going to take some time to identify how to properly build and trust these needed AI interactions. Okay, so now we know we can dynamically shift the tone or language of what was once static information. And perhaps we now have our chatbot trained to sound like your favorite celebrity. But aside from the experience being more relatable, is it higher quality? Is it going to lead to higher conversion rates? If you've experimented with any of the Gen AI offerings, you'll know they're very good at understanding your requests because they can understand human language so well. So as we expand our user experiences to include conversational AI, we open the ability for our users to talk to our products and our product information. A person can just talk to the AI and describe the type of person they're buying for, and the AI can consume that information and interact with the search to source the proper recommendations. AI is also really good at combining multiple sets of information together. So if we're looking for a car seat that fits comfortably in the back of my smallish car that's also under $100, I can just tell the AI what kind of car I have and what kind of requirements I have. And it can compare its vast data set against the provided product description and provide you your list of recommendations. Or instead of searching through all the user reviews looking for the one specific piece of information I want, we can just ask an AI assistant to provide the answer based on only user reviews. To accomplish this, we just need to train our internal models on each new review as it's written. I think with AI, we're migrating away from having to try and fight with interfaces to get the information we actually want. We can just interact with the AI and have it do the hard work. All right, so I hope by now you can see the value Gen AI can provide your customers, but it can also add value to your internal organization. Similar to how we can leverage Gen AI to create product details, we can also leverage it to help with internal material generation. And this might come in the form of blog posts, marketing emails, white papers, maybe presentations. In fact, while all the text in this presentation is 100% human created by me, the images are almost all done by AI with a few simple prompt requests. AI can solve what I call the blank page problem. It's really hard to start from scratch. But now you don't have to anymore. Just have AI do a first pass by providing a list of bullets for what information you want to set up, before the information you want, and then set up the context to be the tone and style you're looking to achieve. And AI will do the rest. And in a composable commerce ecosystem, AI can help you get a jumpstart on your product integrations. With well-defined APIs and publicly available documentation, you can query AIs for details on how to configure a product or to generate code to integrate a product. The use cases here are vast, and we're just scratching the surface of AI-assisted developer experiences. I do want to point out that the word generated here is misspelled in this image. If you caught that, cool. I did try a few times to get the AI to properly spell it, but after like 4 tries, I just kind of gave up. And I actually think this is a good example of how temperamental AI interactions can be sometimes. Okay, so this is a good place to reset and ask ourselves, where do we go from here? And I think the answer really isn't known. Obviously, a lot of very smart people are experimenting with AI and identifying valid ways to use it effectively, and also where maybe it needs some time before it can be properly leveraged. I think it's fairly clear AI is going to be around for a long time, but how and what these AI-enabled tools are going to look like is still a work in progress. We will see the creation and adoption of new applications that leverage AI to help us be more efficient in our everyday work. And these tools are also going to change the way we work and the way we interact with the world. And we're going to have to learn and grow and adapt as this technology becomes more prevalent. And I believe we have to make sure we're doing it safely and ethically. And this means you'll likely want to put up guardrails around your AI interactions. These guardrails can help ensure your AI only answers questions relevant to your brand and only updates content in a way that's positive to your brand. Otherwise, your customers might have free reign and might have interactions that could have a negative impact. The usage of cloud vendor provided or self-hosted LLMs will enable you to keep your data, your customer data, and your interaction data private. If you're leveraging public LLMs, you're feeding all that information directly into the model as training data, and it could show up in somebody else's response. So we don't know exactly what will come next, and we're in the experimentation phase of this technology. Some use cases, as we've discussed, are already being deployed, but this is just scratching the surface. And I'm fairly comfortable in saying this technology is going to move quickly. So you need to set yourself up for success. So you have to ask yourself, what areas of your customer experience are struggling, or what can use improvement? This might be cutting costs or exploring ways to gain efficiency, improving time to market, innovation. Think about your brand. What types of experiences are you wanting to create? Can you gain efficiencies leveraging AI to create product descriptions or translations of existing information? Can you connect better with your customers via a hyper-personalized experience? Can you have a stronger and easier engagements through conversational commerce? What is right for you and your customers? And is your commerce solution flexible enough to incorporate innovations as they are found? And FYI, composable commerce is great at this. So let's look at what we've discussed for guidance. If we combine the ability to generate details, hyper-personalization, and conversational commerce, we're at a point where we have a conversational agent that talks to a person in a voice that is made for them, understands their specific nuances, and responds accordingly. Websites and touch points can dynamically generate or update product content to cater to an individual. Each customer interaction creates a new and unique visual and conversational moment that is built on that customer profile and will update with that customer over time. This is a powerful shift in the approach we can take, and it's tangible. There is work to be done to ensure all of this is done safely and correctly, but we understand how to do it, and we can start making progress today. And you're going to need to get started because you can't afford to miss out on this opportunity. So you're going to need to upskill your teams. Effectively using AI is a skill and one that will take time to become good at. I'd recommend you start training a few key individuals now, and then they can knowledge share what they learn. So we've reached the end. And I hope this has helped you better understand a bit more about AI and how it can improve your customer experiences. Once again, I'm Mark Stracuza, and here at Commerce Tools, we provide the leading composable commerce platform, giving companies all of the components required to build and run outstanding shopping experiences. So as you're starting or continuing your commerce journey, please keep us in mind. We'd be happy to help you out. Thank you.
All right, Mark, well done. You're feeling the love already. Christina Stens, I'm going to butcher her name. I so apologize. Svensvag says, not a question, but super appreciative of Mark's focus on the fundamentals here. I'm a prompt PDM and loving the straightforward definitions and examples. So see, the love's coming in already for you. You know what I'm saying? It's a beautiful thing.
Beautiful thing.
All righty. So let us move forward here. It's instant poll time. Just a reminder that Commerce Next webinars are meant to be interactive, not just with polling questions that are coming up, but also, and much more importantly, by being able to take and answer your questions. Think of our panelists as your generative AI, customer experience, personal focus group. Ask your questions and upvote the audience questions you want to put to the panel. Now, to start us off, I want to take a look back to our October 25th webinar, where we asked our audience about their company's approach to AI. Now, specifically, we asked, how is your organization currently using generative AI to enhance the customer experience? Very direct question. The answer is pretty much what we expected. 53% of our audience saying they were exploring it, with only 20% either piloting it or having a fully integrated AI program. Clearly, we are in the initial stages of this development and deployment, so that's kind of what we want to explore here. And so with that, I want to go to our first question. Jill, if you want to fire this one up. Question number one, what are the main challenges you face starting a generative AI program to improve your user experience? I'm going to have you pick the top three. So let's start off. Is it a lack of technical expertise? Is it data privacy and security concerns? Is it budget constraints? Fourth answer is getting buy-in from management, integration with existing systems. How about regulatory compliance or legal issues? Is that a problem? Or other? And of course, you can always specify that in the chat. All right. So it looks like in first place, it's data privacy and security concerns, followed by integration with existing systems. In third place is regulatory compliance and or legal issues. Let us close that one. All right, that's very interesting. Next up, question number two. What are the biggest benefits you expect from using generative AI? You can pick up to three here as well. Again, I'm trying to focus our panelists in for the discussion here. Is it A, increased customer satisfaction and engagement? Is it cost savings and operational efficiency? Are you looking for a competitive advantage? How about enhanced product customization, personalization, or increased profit and revenue? And again, if it's something else that we missed, you can toss it into the chat. Again, kind of what I expected, but in equal proportion. So it looks like a third of you are saying increased customer engagement and satisfaction. Right behind that is cost savings and operational efficiency. And those are like 32 and 26% each. And then it drops. It looks like increased profit and revenue and competitive advantage are at 11 and 10%. Excuse me, we just had a jump here. Enhanced product customization and personalizations at 20%. So I think I'm going to call this as increased customer engagement and satisfaction, number one. Number two is cost savings and efficiency. And number three is enhanced product customization and personalization. All right, awesome. Thank you for that. Appreciate that. Our next question is going to be for our December 6th Cyber Week recap, featuring the insights of Jason Goldberg, the Chief Commerce Strategy Officer of Publicis Group. And we would like to know, question number three, how do you expect holiday 2023 to compare to plan? Is it much ahead of plan? Slightly ahead of plan? At plan? Slightly below plan? Or, as you might guess, response E, much below plan? And if this seems familiar to some of our veteran viewers, this is exactly what we asked you at this time last year. So we're going to do a little comparo, see what the temperature is this year versus last. Now, you guys are killing me. It is a perfect bell curve. 38% of you are at plan. It's almost equal, slightly above and slightly below. And then 6% of you are either much ahead or much below. The perfect bell curve. Well done, audience. All right, perfect. So it looks like there's kind of it's kind of right in the middle. That was not the case, if I recall correctly, this time last year. So I will let Scott divulge those results on our next webinar. Good, perfect. All righty. And with our polls in, our presentations done, we're at the bottom of the hour. It's time to bring on our panelists. Hey, Hani.
Hello.
How's it going? And Amy and Mark and Bill. Good to see you all. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us today. Let's dive right in because we're starting to get some good questions coming in. So I want to start blowing through this. All right, so let's bring on the retailers. I'm going to have you all introduce yourself. Honey, I'm going to start with you. Amy, you'll go next, and then Bill. Why don't you tell us who you are, what company you're from, and kind of give us a little bit of any background in your company so we understand your scale and perspective on this topic. Honey?
Yeah. Hi, everybody. I'm Hani Batla. I work for Adorama. We are a local New York institution, been around for almost 50 years now. Definitely the premier destination for all things professional audio, video, and photography, but our scope is beyond just that. We actually have several other brands under our portfolio of companies, including scuba.com, Sunny Sports, and all. We are a fairly decent mid-size retailer with 95% e-commerce of our business. And, our perspective on this is because of our scale, we have to continually look at new technologies to grow our business and provide better customer experiences. So that's my perspective.
Excellent. Amy?
Hi, everybody. Amy Salino. I'm the Director of E-commerce and Digital Marketing at Cerberus Capital Management. We're a private equity firm. A little bit about my background. I was, post MBA in the CPG marketing space before I got into e-commerce and digital marketing in early 2006. So I'm a traditional marketer who's been in digital and e-com for a little bit of time. My role here at Cerberus is I run the digital and e-commerce practice for our operating platform that's focused on tech. So along with my team, there are a lot of data scientists, data engineers, people really well versed in this topic. And, happy to talk about some of the things as we get into the conversation that we're doing around that. And that's a little bit about me.
All right. And Bill, you work with a tiny little company, right?
Yeah, it seems like that sometimes and seems overwhelmingly like trying to move a battleship other times. So I'm Bill Bass. I'm the Chief Marketing Officer, although I also have IT reporting into me. So I get marketing and IT, and the swim division reports into me here. So I'm in charge of swimsuits. So I get random things. We're the Island of Misfit Toys a little bit in my department. So Full Beauty Brands is about $1 billion in sales. So we're a collection of various and sundry legacy catalog brands. It's kind of our typical background. We do about 80% of our sales are now on e-commerce, but we still send out a boatload of catalogs. And we focus on plus size women and big and tall men. So that's our kind of our market niche.
Outstanding. I want to jump right in. Let's talk about the specific applications of Gen AI that you guys have been implementing, and how, if as far as the customer experience is concerned. And Honey, I'm going to come back to you, and I'll stick in the same order. We'll go Honey, Amy, and Bill.
All right. Yeah, I mean, Mark gave a great presentation, so good job there. And a lot of the stuff he said definitely resonates with me because that's exactly how we've been thinking about it for a while now. I think there's several areas of opportunity. I think the one where we started out is already around the product detail page. For example, our customers are all about getting information on very high-end cameras and lenses and all. So the more we can do to improve the content on our product detail pages, the better it is for our customer. But that's not where you stop, right? It's also then moving beyond that and then trying to build even more meaningful, helpful content that is sourced from things like user-generated reviews or um, you know generating FAQs that can summarize a lot of the information that's spread in so many different places and bring it all in one place. Um, that's definitely the lower hanging fruit. You can then leverage all of that once you've started using Gen AI for that. Our big area of opportunity as we see it is more around elevating the experience altogether by marching towards a product discovery application that would be built off of Gen AI. So the idea is that we can then train the OpenAI's LLM with our own product data, our own blog articles and content we create because we are very much about educating and empowering our community. So anything and all things we do for that community, we want to make sure that the AI is there and informed, learns our voice, learns the specialty we bring to this market, and then makes all of that information readily accessible to a customer, right? So imagine if in our world today, if somebody wanted to know something about the latest Sony camera or something, they'll come to our site and they'll look at that product, but there's a very good high probability they're going to go back out to Google it even more, read a million other articles and blog posts, and that opens us up to the option of losing that customer, right? Because boom, my competitor could easily drop in a paid search ad right there, and suddenly we've lost them because now Google had context of what they were looking for, and they'll direct them somewhere. So the idea is the future for us is making sure that the customer continues to stay with us, our both pre and post purchase, and then there's tremendous opportunity there. Then you could, once you have all that built, the opportunities and use cases for customer service and retention and all these things are just limitless. I mean, we could keep talking more and more about this, but that really is where we think it's headed.
Yeah, that's interesting. You mentioned the product display pages because we have a question from Alex Richardson. I normally don't go into questions this early, so I'll just kind of put it out there for Bill and Amy to comment on as they talk about their use cases. But Alex Richardson, who we know very well, and is a very good friend of Commerce Next, it's always great to see his name pop up. He was interested in hearing how AI would impact the product display pages. And by the way, Mark, a little more love for you. He thinks you did a great job on your presentation as well. So more love coming in for you. Amy, let's talk about how you're using Gen AI.
Yeah, and I neglected to explain something about my role too, which will help give some important context. So my group works on the portfolio companies that Cerberus Capital Management invests in. So we work with the private equity desk specifically, and we're in a variety of businesses, a lot in B2B and a handful in the B2C space. So my job is essentially to help create that top line and bottom line growth to prepare for the company's exit and return those profits to the funds and our investors. So across our operating platform, there are a lot of applications that relate to balancing supply and demand and also pricing, logistics. And then one of the more interesting ones from a retail perspective is how we've used a model to predict the ROI of specific influencers for social media. And one of the interesting pieces of that work is that you have to kind of start with the attribution method. And this particular company was doing a post-purchase survey to ask consumers, where did you hear about us? And using that as the main attribution driver for the work. But it was a machine learning model, feature engineering, regression, a lot of stuff that's, data science related. but it was successful in predicting which influencers that an agency recommended were more likely to get a much higher ROI. So that's one interesting application that we've done. We've also used it to absorb a lot of information that's in like unstructured data, for example, contracts, absorbing hundreds of pages of contracts and parsing out start and end dates, and extrapolating key terms, and also getting some pricing insights from those contracts to help inform future contracts using natural language processing. So those are some of the applications that we're actively involved in with our portfolio companies and our data science teams.
All right, definitely have your hands full. Bill?
Yeah, we one of the good things about being on panels like this is when we were meeting earlier and Hani was talking about the using generative AI to go in and look at customer reviews and kind of make that easy for customers to do it, so you don't have to read through the 500 customer reviews. We have done that at Full Beauty, but we give it to the merchants, right? So it's like, here's feedback on your product from the customers. And it had literally never occurred to me to show it to the customers. And now I'm like going, oh, that's a heck of an idea. So I think we're gonna go back and change our PDPs as a result of that. We're already doing all the work. We're just showing it internally. We should show it out externally. The other thing for us, we had an interesting, one of the problems you get into when you start talking about AI is it sounds mathy and complicated and big and, big project. And you got the lawyers involved. One of the questions earlier, what's stopping you from doing this? It's like fear of data privacy and things like that. And so those kind of projects get to be hard to accomplish. And so we tried to start off small and just start playing around with it. And the first thing that we did around generative AI was coming up with alternative headlines for our subject lines for our emails. And we knew that if we do an A/B test at the beginning of the email send, there's a subject line that's going to outperform. And then if you hop over to that, you can go. But now all your creative people now you just doubled their work. Instead of this many headlines, I need you to do twice as many headlines. And then you're always getting their second best headline as their second choice, right? And so we had generative AI come in and do the second headline that we were going to test against. And that second headline wins about half the time. And it gets about a 4% increase over the headline that it beats. So that gives a 2% overall increase in our email revenue. And we do about $200 million a year in email revenue. So a 2% increase, you got $4 million, cost of goods 50%. We just got $2 million of EBITDA. And I figured out it costs us about $30 to $35 a year for the ChatGPT time to generate these emails. And so that's one of those really high return, low effort. Low effort. Mark made a very, kind of went through you got to prompt engineer and do the rest of that stuff. But once you get that done, the incremental effort is actually really small.
Yeah, it's interesting you mentioned, and I'll digress slightly here for a second. When you mentioned sharing the feedback back to the manufacturers, was doing that at my previous job at Vintage Tub and Bath, and we would kick back. This is in the early days of product reviews, 2010, and we were kicking back information to them because it was killing our service department on certain products. And we said, look, don't take our word for it. Yeah, this is what they're saying publicly, and that's what caused some changes. So I dig you on that one. That one resonates with me. I think I want, there's just, during our talks prior to this, the issue is that there's just so many different directions we can go. So I'm going to kind of let the audience drive in on this. I'm going to go back to both Alex Richardson's comments about how AI will impact the PDP, because I think you were mentioning that that's kind of one of the starting places, Mark. And I'm going to bring you back in. Is that your opinion on this whole thing? That's like, if anyone's going to start anywhere, it's the product display page as far as you're concerned. Is that right?
I think so. I mean, when you think about the most obvious use cases for generative AI, it's generating text and images. And where does that, the text, the images, these are all PDP related content. And then of course, I brought it up in my talk earlier, the idea of that hyper personalization of that content is something that I think is kind of the next step after that, which is essentially, you're going to generate it, you're going to get time to value, efficiency, cost savings on just creating the content from zero. but then either updating it based on the feedback you're getting from your customers. Building the A/B testing on the emails is a great use case. You can do that on detail pages as well, right? And then taking that and then taking it to the next level with the hyper personalization, I think is super intriguing to me.
Well, we're on kind of fast tips here, and we'll get into some more of the broader topics in a second. But this kind of just kind of weaving this based on the customer questions or the attendee questions. We have Josh Himwish, and he's asking, as companies scale, I see how the value of AI scales with it. When, however, you're an early stage brand forward DTC company, think high profile with of the branding with low SKU count. What would you see as a low hanging AI fruit that could most move KPIs for conversion and retention? So we talked about product display pages. What are we thinking about AI from moving at KPIs on conversion and retention? Any initial thoughts on that? Amy, you're nodding your head. I'm going to instinctively go to you. Bill's laughing. He's next. Bonnie's looking down. I'm definitely calling on him.
Yeah, so on-site search, there's some tools out there that are starting to use AI for on-site search and merchandising. We've talked about product detail pages and how wonderful tools like ChatGPT are for generating copy very quickly. The other applications that come to mind would be testing and UX UI testing for sites and getting a really fast cycle, because Gen AI can actually generate user. It's kind of crazy to even say what user behavior will be based on past patterns. So there's some experimentation going on there. I may have mentioned chat. We're building a proprietary one, but there is a Google Gen app builder that you can use as well as Chat Gen out there that can get folks started, and probably a whole handful of third-party vendors that are developing digital products in that area as well.
Mm-hmm. Bill, what are your thoughts? What other low hanging fruit is there out there?
Yeah, and so the subject line testing for emails, it could be emails, could be SMS, could be whatever text place you want to use. Those are easy. The thing that's kind of interesting, the point that he was making earlier, which so I said, a 2% increase on $200 million in sales generates a lot of money, right? But that same 2% increase, if you're only doing $200,000, it's a little bit less exciting, right? So you're clearly going to end up with things that, as scale happens, percentages lead to bigger dollars. But a lot of startup companies, so I have my own startup. It's not a startup anymore. It's about 15 years old, but it's still small. It's and we use Shopify for that business. And Shopify has been really interesting because they have a lot of small company plugins for really cheap. So I think in that world, I would say don't go out and do your own AI stuff. Just there's got to be Shopify plugins. There's probably a list of them that you can get really cheaply. It integrates right into your website and makes the world easy. So I suspect for smaller startup companies, it'll be more. You'll be able to get all the benefits of generative AI, but you're not going out doing it yourself. You're getting these easy plugins.
Honey, any thoughts on this? You might be muted. You should not be muted.
I know.
There you go.
Here's how my take is. Amateur mistake. I think the beauty of AI, and especially generative AI, is that it is actually making a lot of things more easily accessible to any size company or brand, right? So if anything else, if you think about it this way, if you're a smaller DC brand, you may not have the resources to scale up to a giant customer service team that can be always there on phone and email and everything. Instead, a chatbot that is built off of that could be far more superior because now it's fully well versed about your product, your brand. It understands your voice. It can interact with customers in a lot more meaningful ways because it can talk about your product in a way normal FAQs and articles would not, right? And I think
Yep.
as Amy and others just said, right, there's so many tools available out there, whether it's right off the shelf stuff from Google or Microsoft or whoever, it's great, right? Because you can totally use it. The other nice thing is, as Bill and all indicated, there's a lot of plugins and tools already. I mean, there's a lot of customer service platforms out there that are already now building Gen AI capabilities right into it. The advantage there is that even if it's no customer service agent, the Gen AI can do a lot. And then you give that and add it to the tool belt of a customer service agent, it really takes them to the next level, right? Because now suddenly they have way more context about the customer. The Gen AI knows so much
Yeah.
more about what they're asking for. It can pull into all sorts of things like customer records and order history. And if it's trained on all of that, there's just so much potential there. Um, and I think that's where we kind of, it's still early days. I can't even imagine how far we'll take it. Yeah, I mean, it's just it's we could talk about this quite a bit. Yeah.
I wanted to add something to that because it was. I've always been, not always. Yeah, as this has come up, I've been reluctant to turn generative AI loose on our customers unsupervised because if it starts hallucinating, that's awful. And so, but talking to my data science team literally, we had just had this discussion last week. Their sense is that with some of these large language models where you can limit it, bring it private, bring it internal, and you just train it on your own FAQs and questions and stuff like that, that the possibility, the likelihood of hallucinations drops because it's not being trained on 50 different companies frequently asked questions or 500 or 5,000 companies. It's being trained on your frequently asked questions. And so they were trying to convince me, and we'll see. We'll do a test, and we'll see if we end up with any hallucination problems or if there's a marked decrease in it. But I've always just been worried about unsupervised robot running around answering customer questions.
Yeah, no, I
Ooh,
agree
I
with you,
would
Bill.
be.
I think that's where the advantage is. We ourselves have dabbled a bit into training the LLM with our data, and that's how you fine tune it. You get the right, you know, you can control it at that point, right? And almost like that's how you reduce the hallucinations and hopefully at some point biases and all sorts of other stuff. But you have more control over it.
Yeah, there's so many directions I want to head here because there's like three different topics bouncing in my mind. So we'll start with, let's talk about these hallucinations and not letting this stuff loose on the general public without some sort of guidance. I was reading one of Scott Galloway's articles today about the topic, and he was like, "Yeah, there's some great examples out there. I mean, we heard about the one lawyer who got himself in trouble for giving a brief that had fake legal arguments in it. I mean, they didn't even exist. These cases never even existed, and they're citing them. And so the judge hauled off on them. But it can be things like bias. I was reading where resume reviews using AI are picking people named Jared who play lacrosse for whatever reason, whatever was sitting back in their mind, in this generative AI mind, is sitting there. So you can have things that are horrible coming out of this. So one of the questions I want to ask is how, what level of human interaction are you going to be placing on top of this? Like, I mean, I don't want to create a horror show here, but man, there are some issues with this. Anyone want to tell me how you guys are dealing with this? It's a jump question. Anyone can take it.
So I think I kind of alluded a bit to it. I think by
Mhm.
controlling what the AI is trained on, I think that helps, right? That's the first step. Beyond that, of course, there's the fine tuning. That means you're also doing QA on it, right? You're basically doing QA on the data going in, and you're doing QA on the data the responses that are coming out, right? I think that's the most essential step. I think that's, and then beyond that, I think uh, you know, biases, all that stuff. It's ongoing, right? The model itself is getting better. You can, in my mind, one day maybe we'll have not one but more than one uh, LLMs sitting behind our businesses and tech, and we could have them check each other and make sure that the best one wins, kind of thing, right? There's also a strategy you could employ in the future. Um, so I mean, it's again early days, right? But right now we're just taking baby steps.
But it could also be a two. It could also be a two. I'm sorry, Mark. Go ahead. I'll jump
Yeah,
in.
no, it's all good. I think that there's two levels here that can even come before the question interacts with the AI, right? And that's the idea of prompt manipulation or prompt,
Yes,
or
that's where I was
guardrails,
going.
which you bring up, which is the idea is that when a person asks a question, if the question is out of bounds for your brand or your data set, you just say, "I'm sorry, I'm not trained on this information," and you don't even go to the LLM. It doesn't even touch the AI, right? Or you can take the prompt and you could run it through a little bit of manipulation before it gets to the LLM to make it a better framed question, right? Or multi-pass prompt. You could do two passes to even get better results. And also you can set up your context to really know how to respond. And we've really explored this with Commerce Tools is making sure that if somebody's asking a question of perhaps our documentation or something like that, that it's only going to answer on behalf of Commerce Tools. And it's not going to go out and answer on top. It's not going to go out and answer a Shopify response to a Commerce Tools question, right? And you have to be careful with that. And of course, training an LLM from scratch is one way to do it. But if you're using a public LLM and you're building on top of it, which is a popular model that is being used right now, then you have to kind of put that guardrails in place.
But it's also a question guardrail, isn't it? Like, if you know how to ask a question, generative AI can work out. It can delete some of the bias. It can be better and more specific, right? Like, I think that's part of it. I was looking at like prompt, like best practices for prompts, and specificity. It helps in any number of ways, whether it's geographical, time frame, user, language, region. It's all of that helps AI wipe out some of the biases. You might remove Jared and Lacrosse from being the most preferred candidate for whatever position you've got. I want to there's two other areas I kind of want to go with this. Brendan Victor over at Forrester. Again, Brendan, great to have you on here, and I think it's a good question. We talked about customer experience, or customer service in relation to it. And his question is, I wonder if any of you feel, see, or expect customer service transformation with Gen AI, and if so, how? Now, we talked about this with FAQ and some of these others. I just want to make certain I get his question answered and that we completely covered that topic. Is there any more commentary? No, Hani, you gave us some good work on that. Bill, Amy, any other comments on that before we move on?
No, as far as chatbots and all our experiences using chat when it's clear you're speaking to a robot versus a person, I think are only going to improve over time. As these technologies advance and get more sophisticated, it'll get a little harder to tell when you're speaking to a human, and that's probably from an experience standpoint a good thing. There are risks and unintended consequences, like we talked about, with using these technologies, and regulations are, while there are more regulations now than there were even a couple of months ago here in the US, there are some regulations in the UK. Legislation is generally slow to follow technology, and so there's legal risk, there's accuracy risks, there's unintended consequences, like the interview in the Jared example. So there's a new area called responsible AI. And if you look up responsible AI in Google search trends, you'll see that the last rolling 12 months, it's increased. The interest in that topic has increased. And so there was a study by the Pew Research Center that said that 70% of people had heard of AI, but they don't believe that companies are going to use it responsibly. And that 4 out of 5 people felt like their personal information would be used in ways that it wasn't intended with AI. So there's going to be more focus around this topic of responsible AI, and its intention is to really make sure that it's being used in a responsible way without these risks and unintended consequences, because companies really aren't understanding what the risks are. Some of the suggestions like Hani made to make sure that you're not getting results that are not what you intend. And it's often that there are AI initiatives that are happening in large companies in different departments or different groups without them being aware of each other, since AI is just such an emerging technology and such a focus for so many people.
That's a great point. I mean, that's hits spot on to what the biggest challenge was from our audience, was the data privacy and security concerns. And then right behind that's integration with existing systems. But your point really is on target with that. Bill, you look like you were deep in contemplation there. And I wanted to give you...
It's all an act.
Oh, good. See, that's where you can admit it. That's why we love you.
I think one of the things that will happen. So if you go to a call center, if you go to our call center, we have a call center in El Paso. And you sit there and you watch our guys and girls doing chats. they'll have 4 or 5 different chats going on at the same time because they've tried to figure out what's the most efficient way to do it. If it's one-to-one, you're better off picking up the phone to them, but you can scale the person. But at 5, they're like bouncing back and forth, and it takes, when I go in and I hit a chat and I'm trying to chat with something, it's like you're waiting long times for responses. I find it incredibly irritating. But I think what you could do is, if you don't sit there and say, hey, we got to do everything with generative AI, or we got to do everything with people, we got to do these things together. I guarantee you, if all they're doing is just looking at the response and making sure it's not wacky, and then hitting send, you can scale your call center folks, your customer service. We still call it call center because I should call them customer service people. So the customer service people, I could probably have 20 different chats or 50 different chats, depending upon how much you trust the AI and how much kind of control you got to make. I flew for the military and still fly a lot, and my autopilot flies better than I do, no question about it. But sometimes it gets really wrong. And so it's still not to the point where I could just read the newspaper and not pay attention to what's going on in the cockpit. And I think it's going to be some of that kind of man-machine interface thing going on that's going to bridge us for probably the next 5-10 years as we go forward.
Good points. So we are nearing the top of the hour. 2 great questions just came in. So I'm going to hit you with complex questions and try to get super quick answers out of you. Alexis, I'm not even going to try to pronounce it, Solarino, is asking, with a major topic regarding AI and how it will affect a lot of creative jobs, generative visual and copywriting, what would you recommend as an organization that we begin to think about, consider as a middle ground? It's interesting. Is there fear in your organizations that these are going to be replacing jobs? Amy, again, you've got heavy nodding, which absolutely draws my eye to you to have you answer that.
The timing is impeccable. I literally had a conversation less than a couple hours ago about this in the hallway with a number of colleagues. Because one of our teammates is experimenting with this and seeing what's possible, and I was getting a conceptual understanding of how this works. So the technology could potentially replace some of the costs of external creative agencies and the real live photo shoots that you do that may cost $200,000 a day, plus you have photographer usage and model usage that go into the cost of those images. The way that I understand it is you're giving some initial pieces of data in the way of, say, 5 to 7 images that the Gen AI starts with. So, therein lies a whole bunch of usage questions about those initial images that are used to train the models, right? Like, who gets credit for those? Who makes those? Right. And as a creative agency or as a creative team, are you now in the business of creating those initial data inputs that get used as springboard for other images that are created through Gen AI? So it's a very interesting topic. There's something called something Google has been working on for a while called Dream Booth, and it's based off of stable diffusion. And I'm talking out of my own depth here, but there is enough reading on this that if you're really motivated, you can and actually figure out how to make some Gen AI images on your own. So it is coming, and it is going to be transformative in terms of productivity and efficiency, cost savings.
Yeah, I'd like to calculate from a different perspective. I am an optimist here, but I can tell you, again, defaulting to my org, we are very much plugged in with the community of creators. So if our take on it, and mine also, is simple. I think Gen AI is going to be an extremely powerful tool for creators and artists and all. I think the stuff that artists don't want to do, Gen AI is going to make that go away, because what it does is, even if it's, let's take an example, right? Copywriting. You can get it generate 10 different ideas. Today, Bill's team is using for email subject headers, but we're already contemplating using it for getting ideas for blog posts and stuff, right? Again, fully trained on our data, fully trained on all sorts of things specific to our business, and then our voice. And then the idea is then you have some very good editors and all who can then actually produce more because of it, right? and their not jobs are not threatened if they master the art of using the AI as a tool alongside them. Same goes for photographers. Amy just gave a brilliant example, right? You need to feed the AI something to get it started. And especially that's how you're going to control your look, your everything, because the AI will be taught by you from those seed images or original ideas that you have, your look, your everything. And then the AI just amps up the rate at which you can produce more off of it, right? And I'm going to give a little shout out to my own content team. Adram actually on its YouTube channel right now has a series called Through the Lens, just about how artists can use now AI to take their game to the next level.
Yeah.
So I would recommend people check that out too, because they actually talk to artists who are doing it in different use cases.
Yeah, I think real quick,
Go ahead.
the idea of again that blank page problem, right? You're talking about training AI or training AI on images or text and then having it generate the final content. If you invert that and you have AI be the basis, and then you hand that off to your experts to take a photo shoot. Maybe AI creates some ideas, and you go, "This is the one. This is the kind of style I want." Or you have AI create the first pass at a draft content document, and then your copyright editors finalize that or come up. There's all sorts of ways it can interact here.
We are so over time right now. We're like a couple of minutes over, but I'm dying to ask all of you what's your best recommendation, like the one thing the audience should be taking away. Mark, the other thing, I got to apologize. I think we hear a lot about composable commerce. We hear a lot about generative AI, and there's definitely an intersection there. And I wanted to ask you about that. I know one of our handouts addresses that. So if that's a concern for any members of the audience, I definitely recommend downloading that before we take off here. But it's a quick round robin. I want to end on, what is your best idea, your best first step? Amy, you keep nodding your head, which means you're just going to attract me to you doing this. I'm just going to zoom in on you. So you first, we'll go to Bill, Hani, and then we'll let Mark wrap it up.
Yeah, I'll make this quick. Just start using ChatGPT for your own life to make your own work easier, even for copywriting, because you're going to start to play around and understand how the prompts work. I find I'm using it more than Google now to get information, because the information comes back in a very composed and condensed way that's very quick, that saves me from maybe doing, say, 20 different Google searches, right? So that's the best way to kind of make yourself familiar. Start to think about what are the real value add opportunities in your organization to save time. Because this is really an enormous accelerator and productivity enhancer. And it behooves all of us to at least understand how it works for ourselves.
Yeah, great idea. Microsoft Bing also has the option to use generative AI in response to their answers as well, which I thought was fun to see them doing that. Bill, what's your recommendation? Where should we start?
This is one of those, because you're going to have board members that are going to ask your CEO and your executive team about, hey, what are you doing around generative AI and AI? That's a buzzy thing that's going to happen. It's already happening. And so then organizations go, oh, we got to come up with some big idea in order to keep the board member happy. You'll sit there and go, oh, wow, yeah, you guys are, this is going to remarkably change the value of the company. And you should do those. We have 30 some odd data scientists floating around working on projects, but don't wait for those big things. Just go ahead and start doing stuff, and it doesn't have to be a data scientist. One of our very first projects was one of our creative people. Actually, we just playing around with it on his own, trying to understand. We have a person here that writes very confusing emails with lots of long chain, and they started running that through ChatGPT and just said, tell me what this person's asking me. And then ChatGPT, well, they're asking you this. And they saved hours out of their day not trying to decipher this confusing thing. And it's little projects like that gets the whole organization understanding that generative AI is not this big, scary thing. It's like an actual tool that will make your life better. And then you can kind of build from there.
Understanding your other employees. that was the recommendation.
This is a true story. I didn't make that up.
That's what makes it hilarious.
Left the names out.
Yes, to protect the guilty. Ani, it's on you.
I mean, I think everybody just said it. You just got to start using it. I think this thing is moving so fast, and every day there's so much more innovation happening. I mean, just this week, OpenAI had their whole thing, and they've announced so many more things now, right? There's models for people to monetize and build their own GPTs that will be available in their app store. The point is, there's so much going on that if you don't keep on top of it and you don't start playing it with yourself, whether it's on ChatGPT or Bing or even on Google search, people will find out that you can actually enable the search generative experience on Google too. And you have to play with all of them because they all have their strengths and they all do some things better than others. I think you got to start there. But beyond that, if you get more curious, then you can go ahead and build your own GPT now, because that's what's available to you if you are on OpenAI's site.
All right, Mark, I'm going to give you the last word, but I'm going to indulge myself here. Josh Himwich was asking for any recommendations for AI conversion testing where it can simulate and test the best winner. Amy was saying check out one called Eggplant. Not sure how good it is, but it's one she's seen. I just wanted to answer his question. Mark, you're the sponsor, man. The last word's on you.
Last words, real quick. I will say, because the second point was integrations and product integrations. I think, real quick to the composability statement. That's what it does. That's the beauty of composability, is it's meant to integrate with things naturally. So white papers, please check them out. And then I'll say, from my point of advice, I'd say get your internal alignment started. Because people are going to start experimenting, and they might start experimenting individually, but you really need to have the organization aligned behind the concept of how you're going to approach AI. Because there's a lot to it. There is the security concerns, there's the legal concerns, there's all those concerns. And if your experimentation is great and you need it, but you also need to start getting the processes of your organization wrapped around the idea of how are you going to adopt this technology. And then the final piece I'll say is, if you're looking to play with AI and building your own, huggingface.co, if you're not familiar with it, is the site for generative AI, kind of open source, huggingface.co.
All right, great. All right, we are well over time, and I just want to really thank Hani, Bill, Amy, and Mark. Thank you so much. I know there's so much going on right now. You guys have put a lot of time into the prep on this, stayed late. I do appreciate it very much. Our audience, thank you for sticking with us. I'm Alan Dick from Commerce Next. On behalf of my other co-founders, Scott Silverman and Veronica Sonsev, I just want to thank everyone for being here today. And we're looking forward to seeing you in December, either at our holiday parties or on our year-end wrap-up with Jason Goldberg. With that, I wish you all a great rest of the week and a fabulous Q4. We'll talk to you later. Take care, everyone.